We've just completed the short track swing in NASCAR. Now, admittedly, they're all different. Bristol is not Richmond. Richmond is not Martinsville, but specifically looking at the most recent race at Richmond and then at Martinsville, we had 10 yellow flags. 4 of those were stage breaks. So in reality, we only had 6. What happens when you get more restarts and more yellow flags? You get more restarts. The product is much more intriguing to watch. And we have been long wringing our hands and talking about what can be done to bring back the fire to these races because they have definitely lacked that. Kyle Petty, I'm going to start with you because you're the only guy on this that's ever put his butt in a race car and I think understands the totality. Before we get to that, I don't want to hear the word tweak anymore.
Yeah,
we're going to do this little thing. They have tweaked beyond comparison. It hasn't worked. The product, if anything, has gotten worse. And I'm not bashing Martinsville and or Richmond. I'm not bashing the racetrack.
It's just the nature of where we're at. And you can't. There is no tweak. There is no tweak for this. And you have to understand that speedway racing, Charlotte, a mile racetrack, is a different form of racing than what short track racing is. Short track is an animal unto itself, just like Daytona, and what we do there is an animal unto itself. Aero comes into both places. You're always going to get that. But it's always been in motorsports that the smaller the track, the more mechanical grip, and the more the mechanics of the car came in, and the less aero. It just shifted. It's like a needle. It just goes from one side to the other, and it becomes more predominantly a chassis-style racetrack. What's happened is, with the gear rules or with the transmissions that we have and the shifting now, with the wide tires, with the no power that we have and all this stuff, it's just changed to where you have to run these racetracks a certain way. You have to run them like a late model series where momentum is the main thing. Momentum. That's why the tracks like Bristol, the tracks that we see a lot of times, the groove has moved up to the top of the racetrack because you got to keep the car wound up. That's why people run up next to the wall. If we had a open rule where you could go back and choose a gear, then some teams would choose to run on the bottom. The other thing, and I will say this, you talk to anybody who drove from about 1995 backwards, they'll say these cars need power. They need 850. They need 900 horsepower. They need 950. They need to be able to spin the tires up off the corner so the driver has to modulate the throttle, and then you're driving against the other guy. If you don't shift and you go in the corner and you mess up, they need to take that out and go back to just a solid rear gear and run one gear. That's it, no shifting. Because when you hear these drivers in interviews say, if I mess up, I just downshift and get my gear, keep my RPMs up and go again. That's all gear and that's all engine. And they need to go back to that, and then the cars will go back to mechanical.
Brad, have we seen enough evidence to realize that to help out the Richmonds, the North Wilkesboros of the world, the Martinsvilles, that there need to be some kind of drastic changes for these cars?
Yeah, I would agree. You've heard me say before that with the next gen, they built a really good race car. Just at certain tracks, they didn't build a car that races really good. And I think this is one of those where we have to make it a much more difficult car to drive. Everything that Kyle Petty says, I mean, obviously his experience speaks for itself and all of that. But if it's so forgiving that you run into issues, or you take Martinsville Speedway, they had the same tire this past weekend that they had back in the fall, but they're saying, well, temperature-wise, if it's only about 65 degrees, it's not going to put rubber into the racetrack and all of that. Let's not have something that depends on outside factors. Let's have something, let's figure out a way that we can determine what this car is going to do in any condition, and we don't have that right now.
Alexis, I vividly remember one of the races recently at Martinsville. It was cold. I was up there. And it's cold, the track's not taking rubber, that's why the race wasn't competitive. All we heard yesterday was, look how much rubber is being laid down on the racetrack. The racing surface was black, and we still got a race that was not scintillating.
Well, there was rubber laying down on the racetrack, but there really wasn't that much tire wear, which is crazy when you think about it. I mean, Joey Logano went 175 laps on right side tires. That's nuts. Denny Hamlin pitted, at that last caution. He was 4th. He came out 10th with brand new tires, first car on new tires, and he ended up 11th. He didn't gain one spot. He lost a spot. That it shows that there's not enough tire wear for short tracks. Tire wear, saving your tires, saving your equipment, that kind of thing is what makes short tracks, late model racing, all of these small tracks, regional tracks, it makes those races exciting. And so obviously I'm not a driver, never have been. I totally agree with Kyle Petty on his assessment because all that was like gibberish in one ear and out the other for me when it comes to mechanics of a race car. But I understand the philosophy behind having a tire that wears well. Look at the product we got at Bristol. Even though nobody knows how we got that, it seems like that race was the most exciting short track race we have had in the next gen era, and it was all because of tire wear. So I don't know if you change all of these things and see what happens. If you make the changes that Kyle suggested, see what happens. If you change the tires, see what happens. And why are we only making small tweaks? Why are we not taking huge swings at this when you think about what short tracks mean to the history of our sport? I would hate, all I need to know is that people are saying, "Oh, well, Richmond might lose a date." What?
Yeah, but then let's be honest. They make small tweaks because in the big picture of the world here of NASCAR, there's only 6 short track races. I know you want to throw Phoenix into it, and I know they want to throw home,
Iowa.
but
New Hampshire.
There's only you want to throw all that stuff in it, but in reality, there's Martinsville and there's Bristol and there's Richmond. You know what I mean? And Richmond's borderline sometimes the way you look at it. And yes, we're going to Iowa, and yes, you're going to do all this stuff. But I'm just saying, it's short tracks have replaced the road courses. Remember when road courses were just an afterthought? And now it almost seems like the short tracks are just an afterthought to what we're trying to do when we lay the rules down.
If I was the team and I'm saying we're going to throw away 4 races, I would say, okay, it's Martinsville and Richmond.
That's right.
Because that's only the 4.
Back in the old days, okay, if we go back to the 70s and the 80s, a lot of teams took their worst cars to Bristol because they knew they were going to tear them up. So it was a throwaway race. The 2 races there, and you had 4 or 5 guys that took really good stuff and they run good. So I mean, when you look at it, it is just we're back to it's a mentality, it's a philosophy, and we've seen the shift with the next gen car, where the intermediate tracks and those tracks are good race tracks, and we see some good racing. And like Brad said, it's a good race car. It just doesn't race well on short tracks.
And I make it perfectly clear, I have no axe to grind against Martinsville or Richmond. Bristol seems to be the least affected by that. I think it's because of the extreme banking. Also, flashback to the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro last year.
Yeah.
I want to see that pay out too.
Yes.
So take a swing for the fences here, and let's see what we can come up with to make these 5 dates stick out on the calendar a little bit better.